Good morning. I'm Tony Fulmer, and this is my maiden Zoom voyage. So I am going to announce it ahead of time. Please be patient with me, but fortunately, I have a very capable assistant next to me to hopefully, she will, not hopefully, she will definitely bail me out. So what we're going to talk about this morning are the summer flowering shrubs, the things that bloom in June, July, and August after the big spring rush is over and things are starting to settle down, the annuals and perennials are blooming, then the shrubs start coming into play. So we're going to start with that. And I know it's a little bit more difficult. You're used to having a handout. So I will try and give you as much detailed information as possible. And Carly will be here alongside me to take questions. And we will take questions at the end of the class here. And I will try and stay as long and as late as possible to answer as many as we can. So without further ado, is there anything else I need to do? See, she's already helping me. She's already saving me. There we go. Right there. Okay. Summer Lovin' Shrubs. Ignore the woman behind the green curtain. Just like Oz. Okay. Summer Lovin' Shrubs. We're going to start out with the spireas. And the big thing about the spireas is the fact that hybridizers have really been working to get, in addition to the flowers, to get lots and lots and lots of different leaf colors. And fortunately, the genetic material has evidently been there because they've been very successful. So looking at the double play series, the double play Big Bang, one of the big attributes of double play Big Bang is the fact that it has the largest flower of any spirea. So you can see it's kind of a deep rose pink in bud, and then it goes to medium pink, and then it goes to a full-blown pink. But it has those orange tips, and then those fade, or I should say age, to kind of a chartreusey green color, which they keep all summer long. So even when they are out of bloom, you have really nice color. The double play series, the double play Big Bang gets about 2 to 3 feet tall with about a 3-foot spread. And the spireas are really best. You really probably want to have those in, when I say a half day of sun, that means at least 5 hours or more. They will perform, they'll stay more compact for you. And for those varieties that really have appreciable summer color, the color will be more intense when you have a lot of sun on them. The next one is Glow Girl, and Glow Girl is a different species than the double play series. It is actually a birch leaf type of spirea. And surprisingly, that white flower that you see there comes from a very deep pink bud. And then it opens up to that pure white flower. And literally for weeks and weeks. The interesting thing about Glow Girl is that many of the gold foliaged or chartreuse foliage shrubs in the past, they have come out that color and then they tend to green off as they age. Glow Girl was selected because it keeps that, after the bloom, it keeps that chartreusey color all summer long. So it makes a really nice color accent. And then it switches to burgundy fall color. And Glow Girl gets about 3 to 4 feet tall with about a 3 to 4 foot spread. Then we have Spirea Candy Corn. And this is also from the Double Play series. And it's almost like a circus, a color circus or color wheel all on one plant. As you can see, these are the color phases that candy corn goes through. It opens in the spring with that really red scarlet or scarlet orange color. And then it progresses through until it finishes in the bottom right-hand corner where you have that bright chartreuse green, and that color stays with it for the whole summer long, which makes kind of an interesting contrast when you have that deep, almost purpley pink flower against it. So it's a really, really, really strong contrast and a really nice effect in the garden. Double play candy corn is a little bit shorter than most of the spireas. Most of these spireas are anywhere from 2 to 3 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide. This one only gets about 18 inches tall with about a 24-inch spread. The things that you should know about the spireas are they are, as I said, sun-loving. They are very drought tolerant once established. And I underlined once established. The first season, you don't want to go away after you've just planted them. You don't want to go away for a week and on vacation and not have someone water them. And if we have 90-degree temperatures, if they dry out once, that's kind of it. But if you keep them moist and get them established after that, they are very, very, very drought tolerant and very hardy. Hummingbirds love them. Rabbits, fortunately, and bunnies do not. And pruning. I think we should touch on pruning on all of these. And so let me preface this by saying there's kind of a general rule. If spring flowering shrubs bloom before July 1st, that means they're blooming on the wood or the stems or the growth that they made the summer before. And so the buds are already there, even if you can't see them, the buds are already there over the winter and in the spring. So that means that you don't want to do any kind of major pruning because you'll be removing flowers. The things that bloom after, like most of the hydrangeas, which we're going to talk about briefly a little bit later, most of the hydrangeas bloom on year-old wood. And that means they're blooming after July 1st. And so typically, some of those you do not want to do any hard pruning on later in the season. So let's move on to Potentillas. The Potentillas are experiencing a bit of a resurgence in favor, just like hydrangeas. And they are really, 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 they're very drought tolerant. Again, like spireas, once they're established, they're very drought tolerant. And they're interesting in that I think they can mix really nicely in a perennial border, or you could also have them in annual borders as a spot of color. They're generally under 36 inches tall with a 36-inch spread. And I think you can see in the close-up like a cheesehead, it's a very fine fern-like foliage that would blend well with perennials. And they have a very, 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 very long season of bloom. In fact, if they are pruned hard early in the spring before they flower, they will flower most of the summer. They are sun-loving. As I said, they'll tolerate very, very, very dry soils. They do, because of all of the residue, there's so many flowers from the year before. You do want to tidy them up in April with a pruning where you're just tipping them back lightly and rounding them off and getting rid of all those old brown seed heads from the year before. Now, the cool advances in these new ones, when you look at the ones on the extreme left and the extreme right, lemon meringue and creme brulee. I've been in the business for over 50 years, and Potentillas were always single flowered. So the addition of these new double flowered varieties like creme brulee and lemon meringue that have flowers that look like little roses really adds a very, very, very nice touch to them. So creme brulee and goldfinger are both larger plants. They'll get 3 feet tall with about a 36-inch spread, where lemon meringue and cheesehead are a little bit smaller, perhaps on the order of 24 inches or so. The nice thing about them is that butterflies love them. And again, deer and rabbits do not. So the Potentillas, I think, make a really good consideration to insert in a perennial border. And like the top left-hand corner here, where you see with goldfinger, where it's mixed in with the blue grasses, it's really nice. And one of the things that we get asked all the time is, what is the longest blooming shrub that we have, or longest blooming perennial? And I think we tend to forget to recommend Potentilla often enough. So that should really be kind of top of mind when you're looking for something that is going to literally bloom for months and months and months. Weigelas. Again, the Weigelas are useful because of the incredible, all the varieties that I show you have wonderful foliage color, and they have these tubular flowers. And what do tubular flowers mean? Tubular flowers means that they're going to be really, really, really attractive to hummingbirds. They're very drought tolerant once established. They like sun, and especially on these purple leaf varieties, anytime you have a purple foliaged shrub or tree, the foliage color is going to be most intense when it's out in sun. So the more sun it gets, there's a direct correlation between that and the leaf color. So there's a whole series here, and Wine and Roses gets approximately 4 to 5 feet tall with a 4 to 5 foot spread. And then its more dwarf counterpoint, Spilled Wine. Catchy, huh? Spilled Wine is more spreading than it is tall. So 2 to 3 feet tall with at least a 3 foot spread. But you can see that wavy little leaf there on the Spilled Wine. And really, really, when it's not in bloom, you get really great leaf color with that. My Monet was really one of the, it's probably been out on the market now for 8 or 10 years, if not a little longer. That was one of the first dwarf Weigelas. And so this would make a great container plant. It only gets about 18 inches tall with about a 24-inch spread, but you have that nice creamy tip on it. And my Monet, in cooler weather in the spring, but particularly in the fall, when it has new growth, those cooler temperatures, you'll very often get a nice pink cast or pink overlay. So it almost becomes a tricolor variegation rather than a dual variegation the way you see here. The buds are deep pink. They open up to a medium shell pink. And again, with that tubular flower, all of the Weigelas are extremely, extremely attractive to hummingbirds. And Rainbow Sensation is somewhat similar to My Monet. Again, you can see that you've got that variegation. Excuse me. It is a larger shrub, more in the order of 4 to 5 feet tall, with a 4 to 5 foot spread. And when the flower fades, it's a lighter pink. So you've got that lighter pink against that creamy, little tiny bit of gold variegation. Golden Jackpot is, again, another one of these chartreuse shrubs that really stays chartreuse. So even when it doesn't have these crimson red buds that open up to a deep purpley pink flower, you still have that nice chartreuse kind of exclamation point of the landscape. So you could use that as a focal point just for the foliage, or you could do a grouping of 3 of them if you feel like you have a sunny area that's maybe got a lot of green and you don't want purple in there and you're looking for a little hit of color. Golden Jackpot does that very, very nicely. This is also deer and bunny resistant. The pruning on Weigelas is a little tricky because with the newer varieties, the flowering has been extended so that some of them bloom into July, which makes the July 1st rule, pruning rule, a little outdated. So if you're not sure about pruning a Weigela, the best thing to do is to do whatever shaping or tipping right after they finish blooming. And that way you'll rest assured that you're not removing any flowers for the next bloom sequence. I don't know how many of you know Itea. This is a wonderful, wonderfully underused little native shrub, and everything about it is special. It flowers for weeks and weeks, and it drives the bees and butterflies absolutely crazy. When mine are in bloom in my garden, you can just, when you get up to the plant, you can hear the bees working and the butterflies are competing with them to get to the flowers. So the flowers are later, typically they are later spring. Typically they occur in June. And again, they last for weeks. They might be in bloom from first bud to last bud. They might be in flower for a full month. and a very, very light, pleasing fragrance. Then this nice green leaf that you see. And then the real bonus, the real icing on the cake is in the fall, because they have this amazing purple, maroon, scarlet, orange, red fall color that is really, certainly would rival a burning bush, and it lasts much, much, much longer. It's not uncommon. Sometimes the leaves will hang on until they're frozen brown. So you can easily have 3 to 4 or more weeks of fall color from this. And then when the leaves do drop, if you have these placed in an area where you walk by them in the winter, they also, the tips of the stems are kind of a purpley maroon red, a little bit like the red twig dogwood. So this is a plant that's really, really useful. We're showing Merlot on here, which is a selected variety, and it's a little bit more compact. So typically what we have, there are gradations. So the smallest one is Little Henry, which gets 3 to 3.5 feet tall. Then we have Merlot, which is 3.5 to 4 feet tall. And then we have Henry's Garnet, and Henry's Garnet gets 4 to 5 feet tall with a 4 to 5 foot spread. Now, the other thing that I have not mentioned yet is, with all the rain that we've been having more than normal number of inquiries about floodplain plants. And the Itea is native to riversides, pond sides, creek sides, wherever you have running water. So it really, really, really is happiest in a moist soil, and it will go in a wet soil, and it will tolerate occasional standing water. That doesn't phase it at all. So this is a useful one to add to that list where you're looking for a shrub for that swampy area where the water just never seems to go away. And even in July, when it's been dry for weeks, it's still a little boggy. IT would be a good consideration for that. And the fact that it not only tolerates that wet soil, but it will also tolerate a lot of shade. Now, a lot of shade may affect the number of flowers that you get, but it tends to not, in my garden, it hasn't impacted the fall color, which is a little bit unusual because good fall color is usually correlated with the amount of sun that the plant gets during the growing season. Pruning on this blooms on year-old wood. So you want to prune it immediately after it blooms, but it doesn't really require a lot of pruning. You might just take off tips. And the other thing about it is that it does have a tendency, it suckers a little bit like a red twig dogwood, but I have not found that to be invasive in any way. So the plant just produces every year, it produces a few more stems around the outer edge, and it gets a little bit broader, but a really, really useful, really underutilized native plant for our gardens. Estes parviflora. This is commonly known as Bottlebrush Buckeye. And again, this is another native plant. And the cool thing, well, there are a lot of cool things about this plant. This plant will do in full sun, it will do in shade. And I've often told people, you can put this plant in a closet, no matter how dark it is. This plant is not fazed by the shade. It's an understory plant. And as you can see by the top right-hand picture, it has a tendency to grow in kind of a roundy, moundy mushroom shape, a little bit like a mugo pine. And end of June, first part of July, you have these amazing white candle-like flowers that can be anywhere from 8 to 12 inches long, totally covering the plant. And again, even in shade, you still get that kind of flower coverage. So it really, really has a tendency to light up a dark area. So you've got this dark, dark green, and it's an interesting leaf. For those of you that know the houseplant Shufflera, it looks a little bit like that. The leaves are arranged like that, and they resemble that. And so this plant that is very, very dense looking, as you see in the pictures here, when the leaves turn that beautiful, clear, golden yellow fall color that you're seeing in the bottom right-hand corner and drop, all of a sudden that plant that was very dense is now more or less a bit of a see-through shrub. It doesn't have a lot of internal branching. So it's not something that you would use for winter screening because you literally can see through it. The plant, it's unusual in that it's a kind of a moderate grower, but once it gets established, the hormone balance on it changes and you'll get these new sucker shoots coming up from the base. And while the mother plant that's established may grow 6 to 8 to 10 inches a year, those new shoots arising from the base can often grow 3 to 4 feet in 1 year. And that's how you start getting the density and the size to the shrub, that it produces new suckers and it just gets wider and wider and wider and broader. So at maturity, you could expect 8 to 10 feet tall with an 8 to 10 foot spread. So it's something you could certainly use as a specimen plant. You'd need a fairly large area if you were going to do them for a staggered grouping of 3. You might space them as close as 6 to 7 feet apart, but probably don't put them closer than that, because you can see that over time they will get very, very large. It's virtually no maintenance because it doesn't respond to pruning. The only kind of maintenance I do with mine is that after the flowers finish and start turning brown, in middle of July or so, I got with my pruners and I just deadhead those and clip them right above the first leaflet that is sitting just at the base of the flowers. I think that's pretty much it for that. Oh, hummingbirds like it. Bees and butterflies like it, and especially swallowtails love it. So it's, you know, again, another great reason for using the natives, because the pollinators are here that will recognize it. Clethra. This is another, we seem to be hitting a streak of, or string of native plants here. Clethra is another one that many of us don't know, and like the Itea, this one has a really, really nice sweet fragrance. And for some reason, it kind of reminds me, if you remember those little, I'm old, I'm dating myself here, I know. Those little candy hearts that we used to get at Valentine's Day that have that really sweet flavor. The flowers smell like that. And the flowers on the Clethra is blooming in July, generally. And the hummingbird is a dwarf variety that gets about 30 inches tall and about 30 inches wide. And you have those arching little white flowers with the wonderful fragrance on those. Bees and butterflies go crazy. So for those of you that want to encourage and feed our pollinators, this is a really, really, really good choice. And it's hard to tell here from this particular picture. I'll show you on the next Friday, but it's a very clean, fine textured green leaf when it's not in bloom. And then you get this very, very nice, clear yellow gold fall color. Now, it will tolerate shade, but my personal experience has been, when I say tolerate shade, I think the plant stays more compact and you get better flowers and you get better fall color if it has a minimum of 4 hours or so of sun a day. And then for those of you that would rather not have pink or white, there is the pink variety called Ruby Spice, which is pretty special. And this shows you the buds are great, the open flowers are wonderful, and this shows the summer foliage on it. So you have a really nice veined, fine textured green leaf that's really nice. This is another one that will do really wet soils, perhaps not as wet. This is not a plant I would necessarily put in a floodplain like the Itea, but if you have a spot that is damp and boggy but doesn't ever have standing surface water and you have some shade, the Clethra would be very, very nice choice for that. So in addition to the nice flowers, the nice summer leaf, the pollinator attraction, it has a really cool, fun little seed head, and it looks like peppercorns. And those will hang on the plant if you don't deadhead the plant after blooming. Those little peppercorns will hang on over the winter for winter interest. This blooms on current season's growth. So because it's blooming later in the summer like that. So if you want to do any pruning, you'll probably start with the deadheading of those seed heads from last year, just shaping the plant so that when you finish, you have a nice loosely rounded silhouette, and then the plant will respond by coming out very uniformly and blooming for you later in the summer. So this is deer resistant. Again, the flowers are long lasting. It's conceivable from first flower to last flower. You can have 4 to 6 weeks of bloom. So there aren't many shrubs that will do that for you. Rose of Sharon. Now, I'm going to start with the disclaimer that during the course of the year, we do have some people that have the older varieties, what I call the grandmother varieties, that are decades old of Rose of Sharon, and there's been a problem with those. They are fertile in the extreme, almost biblical proportions, and so people sometimes say, you know what, I can't keep ahead of this. It's producing so many seedlings. So one of the directives that the hybridizers and growers have been looking for is to produce sterile Rose of Sharon. And here's a little tip, and the Rose of Sharon really exemplifies this. If you have your choice in a flowering shrub between a single flowered variety, and let me go ahead just a second. So that would be a single flower, compared to this one where you see that it's more, there's a little pom-pom in the center. Whenever you get that little pom-pom in the center, that doubling or that anemone flowered, what that means are the reproductive structures have been modified and are now sterile. So what happens is the plant does not produce seed, but the flowers also last a little bit longer because the plant's goal really is to set seed. And if it can't do that, it keeps saying, okay, I've got to keep this flower on here. I've got to keep this flower on here. So the series that I'm going to show you, like the chiffon, and this is a range of some of the colors that are available, are virtually sterile. So for those of you that are worried, that have experienced that, or you've heard your parents, your grandparents complain about the old Rose of Sharon, that they seeded all over and they didn't want to have them, you'd be missing out on a really long season of bloom at a time in July and August when sometimes there's not a lot going on in the garden. So we have this chiffon series. Oh, one other thing, while I'm thinking about it, if you haven't had Rose of Sharon before and you're thinking about putting in your garden, the one thing that you need to know is it's very, very late to leaf out in the spring. So we get a lot of calls in late April or early May. I know that Rose of Sharon you sold me is dead. And then a month later, and we tell them just to be patient and check back with us the end of May. And by the end of May, they call and say, well, you know, it's starting to leaf out. So it is one of those shrubs that is, it sleeps late in the spring, but then when it comes out with a bang. And then you have literally, with these new varieties, you have the potential for weeks, if not months, of flower color. So there's the Satin series. And again, this is another one. Now, even though this is a single flower, this has been bred for sterility, so there are virtually no seeds with this one either. The Rose of Sharon are not a part-shaped plant. They really, really, really like their sun. The other thing that's unusual about them is they have a tendency to be fairly base-shaped. So if you're looking for a specimen shrub that might be 5 to 8 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide, without pruning, the Rose of Sharon, all of the Rose of Sharon will tend to follow that silhouette or growth habit without a lot of maintenance. They really don't require a lot of maintenance. The Little Kim series was developed by a breeder in Korea. And the neat thing about those is that they're dwarf. So instead of getting potentially 5 to 8 feet tall, Little Kim gets probably 4 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet tall, and equally wide. And I'm just showing there's such an enormous range of different color options and flower forms. So there's this tropical series with Bali and Fiji. And White Pillar is, I'm going to skip forward for just a second here. So there's Hawaii, which is also in that tropical series. So let's go back. White Pillar is relatively new, and the Pillar series, at this point in time, there are only 2 varieties, but notice the base shape on this. The base shape on the Pillar series is even more accentuated, and I've seen pictures of them, and the literature says that in the south, they can be as tall as 10 to 12 feet with a 2-foot spread. So probably here this far north with a shorter growing season, we might expect these to be 6 to 8 feet tall with a 2 to 3 feet spread. So that's really a nice option for people where we have limited amount of space in a sunny area and we're looking for something that's low maintenance, but that has that upright form. In the extreme, you could choose white pillar. If you had 3 to 4 feet of footprint to plant in, then you could use virtually any of these other varieties. Butterflies like them. Deer do not. And again, because it's pruning, it's flowering in the summer, typically what I would recommend would be wait until May, either right before they start budding out or as they start budding out, and then do whatever trimming you're going to do because they will flower then on the growth that they make in May and June. Sugar tip is interesting addition to the Rose of Sharon family. If you notice, it has a variegated leaf. And then you have this really, really pretty soft pastel pink with a hint of kind of the cranberry in the center. Those leaves are not just green and white. They're actually a kind of a gray green. I wouldn't say blue, they're gray green. So that pink against that is really nice. And when they're not in bloom, you still have that little bit of that gray cast with the cream edge, which is very, very nice. Sugar tip, even though it's variegated, will still has the potential to get 5 to 6 feet tall and at least 4 to 5 feet wide. Hydrangeas. Now this is a little tease for those of you that thought this was going to be a hydrangea lecture. I'm sorry, you'll have to tune in next week because next week's class is all about it's called 25 All-Star Hydrangeas. So we will go through the whole gamut of all of the amazing hydrangea options that you now have at your disposal. And quickfire, I wanted to put quickfire and little quickfire in here as examples. Now, they are called panicle hydrangeas. And panicle, so they're Hydrangea paniculata is the Latin name. And panicle simply refers to the way the flower is formed. And I think it shows better in little quickfire in the picture here. You have that elongated, pointed ended flower. So that's a panicle hydrangea. The panicle hydrangeas like quickfire and little quickfire are really nice in that they are, once they're established, they're very drought resistant. So the mophead hydrangeas like Endless Summer and Bloomstruck that have that bigger, softer leaf, they are a little bit more, they require more care and more water during the summer if you've got them in a what I call a hot box situation. The panicle hydrangeas, you have a smaller, harder leaf. And so once they're established, they're really, really a good hydrangea choice for droughty or drier areas where maybe you get more reflected heat and lots and lots of sun. I would say these are not the panicle hydrangeas. You really want 5 to 6 hours of sun or more on these. And when you do, you get that nice, full, dense, rounded plant that you have with flowers not only over the top, but around the sides here. I think the most interesting thing about quickfire and little quickfire is that they are the very, very first to bloom. And so in your garden established, they will be weeks ahead of the other panicle hydrangeas. So if you spend your summers at your home in Cape Cod and you're gone for July and August, but you want some color in June, then quickfire and little quickfire would be good choices because they will start blooming in June and early July when the other hydrangeas haven't even started to make the show bud yet. So quickfire gets larger. It has the potential to be 6 to 8 feet tall and 6 to 8 feet wide. And then for those of you that want a more dwarf model, then we have little quickfire, which typically can be 3 to 5 feet tall and 3 to 5 feet wide. Now, both of these, what you're seeing here with the color on them, that is what I call the finishing blush on them. Both of them come out white and they are pure white, and that is typical of all the panicle hydrangeas. They come out pure white and then they fade to different color forms. And so Quickfire has that nice soft pink, and little Quickfire, for whatever reason, gets a darker pink color when it finishes. The panicle hydrangeas, because they're blooming in the summer, they're blooming on current season's growth. So what I do with mine is a nice warm day in late March, early April. When you feel like it, get your pruners and go out, and at the very least, take off all of the old spent flowers, because that's one of the bonuses and one of the reasons that so many people plant hydrangeas, is the fact that the panicle hydrangeas, those seed heads dry and they stay intact over the winter. So in the winter, when the snow is a foot deep and some of the evergreens are covered up, you can look out there and those dried seed heads will still be blowing in the wind on the panicle hydrangeas. So in effect, what you have is weeks and weeks and weeks of them as a fresh flower, and then months and months and months of them as the ornamental seed heads over the course of the winter. I've already mentioned these. I really think you need to have at least 5 hours of sun a day. And the nice thing about these is once they're established, it's really, they don't require a lot of water. The pruning is the late winter, very early spring pruning just to shake them up a little bit. And you don't have to be pushing them with fertilizer in a way that the mophead hydrangeas really appreciate. They are not very needy. This is we talked about summer lovin' shrubs. This is summer lovin' tree. And we really, I really wanted to sneak this in because it's unusual in that both the flowers and the fruit on it are interesting. So for those of you that have either lived in the South or have traveled the South extensively and paid attention and have fallen in love with the crepe myrtles, I would consider the Seven Sons to be kind of the crepe myrtle of the North, because it is typically a multi-stemmed, very large shrub or very small tree, and you get this wonderful peeling, exfoliating bark that is kind of creamy white. And so that is a great, great, great interest 365 days of the year. It's an added bonus, and especially if it has a backdrop either of a darker structure or if it had evergreens behind it, that really pops that creamy white peeling bark on it. It has a nice elongated dark green summer leaf, and then in late August, you start getting these white flowers. And they pretty much cover the tree, and they stay for probably a week to 10 days. But then the cool thing is what you're seeing here in this kind of raspberry or cranberry red pink, those are the seed heads on them. And the seed heads, as you can see, are almost more ornamental because obviously picture everything that is now white turning that color. So you've got that kind of raspberry color over the entire plant for probably 3 weeks or so in later in September. So that's a great plant for the bark interest. Typically, it doesn't get more than 15 feet tall, 15 to 18 feet tall, with an 8 to probably 12-foot spread. No appreciable fall color, but you know, we mustn't be greedy. We have already had 365 days of bark interest, and you had flower interest and fruit interest. This is sun loving, and it probably is best in a moist soil. And I think that's about all I have to say about the Seven Sons flower. So we hope this has been of interest to you, and we hope that you have some questions about the plants that we've talked about, because we'll be happy to take those right now. And Carly's stepping in to rescue me so I don't louse this up. So we'll see if any questions have come in. And again, while we're doing that, just remember that next week we're going to be talking about 25 All-Star Hydrangea. So that's on board for next week. What was the common name of, Art asked, what's the common name of Aescus parviflora? And that's bottlebrush, one word, Buckeye. And I think you'll really, really, really like that shrub. Okay. Yusha asked about pruning of Heptacodium. There really isn't a lot of pruning on it. On mine, what I have found is that when you get them as a younger plant, they're already multi-stemmed and they may be branched low to the ground. So one of the things that you might want to do is if you want to limit up so that the first branches are 3 or 4 or 5 feet off the ground, you might just take a few of those off every year until you get the bottom branches pruned up to where you want them. And the other thing is sometimes even after a mild winter, you'll have little tips that will die back. So if there's a lot of those and they're bothering you, you can go in and just take those little tips off after the tree is leafed out so that you can trim them back to where the first leaf is. Can you recommend any, Robin asks, can you recommend any other understory shrubs? Well, when I hear that question, I am thinking that you are talking about lots and lots of shade. So one of the things that we didn't put in here because it's spring blooming, one of my favorites, and one of the things that I think is really, really underused is the Fothergilla. And that's in the witch hazel family. And so like the Bottlebrush Buckeye, you can pretty much put that under even a Norway maple, and you'll still get really nice performance from that. So Fothergilla, Fothergilla, and since it's a member of the witch hazel family, I should also, Robin, based on what size you're looking for, either the fall blooming or the spring blooming witch hazels, which range from 8 to 15 feet tall and 8 to 15 feet wide. Those would be really, really choice selections for deep shade too. So hopefully that answers your question. Donna Kavanaugh, when is the best time to plant these shrubs? That's a really good question. With modern nursery practice and such a high percentage of our plants now being grown in containers, there's no shock at all. So it's not like going out in the field and digging a plant when it's dormant and leaving 60 or 70% of the root system behind. So if a plant is available, you can plant it, and as long as you mulch it and give it supplemental water this first year, then there's no reason that you can't be planting all summer long. So this business of spring planting, fall planting, that old canard just doesn't hold true anymore. Liz, do I need to protect Fothergilla from rabbits? That is a really timely question, and the answer is if you have rabbit issues, yes. While I haven't personally tasted it, evidently the bark is very thin and very sweet, and when we have a lot of snow cover, rabbits will go after them. And so a lot of them, especially my first year or so with a new Fothergilla in my garden, I will very often not trust a repellent, but I will put a chicken wire cage around it and then fold the chicken wire over the top and exclude the rabbits from it. If you didn't do that and the rabbits have taken it down to 6 or 8 inches, hopefully there's still enough buds there that it will grow out, and the plant it'll just be like you gave it a really, really hard pruning. Assistant? Okay. Jane, when a small Hydrangeas or other shrub is planted in a container, is bringing the container inside for winter the only way to guarantee the shrub will regrow the following year? That's a really good question. We get that question a lot. So if you want to use something as a container, as a landscape subject in a pot, the first thing that we ask that you do is that in a perfect world, if you want to keep it for more than a year, we are what zone? We're zone 5. So you want to look for zone 4 plants, hardy plants, because having a plant in a container is the same as taking it one zone farther north and planting it in the ground. So look for zone 4 plants. Put them in the very, very, very largest container that you have. We always recommend 18 by 18 by 18 cubed, and 24 by 24 by 24 would be better, because again, the larger the soil mass, the less likely it is to freeze all the way into the center and damage the roots. And that's really where the winter damage in a container comes from having the root system chilled or frozen. So the one thing you don't want to do is you have to give them a chilling period or a cool period, very much like what they would have if they were out in the garden. So if you have the container and you have an unheated garage or an unheated storage shed, bring it into that for the winter. And typically just that little bit of difference will be enough to keep the soil mass from freezing solid. The other thing to remember when you do that is check it for water once a month or so, because you can still, the plant is still, even though it's leafless, if it's not an evergreen, it will still be losing water and dehydrating. And because it's not getting natural rainfall or snowfall, you do want to go ahead and give it water maybe once a month or so. From Chris, can you tell us more about red twig dogwood? Other ideas for shrubs to help with standing water? Red twig dogwood, frankly, while it takes a really, really, really moist soil, I'm not too happy with it down in an area where it periodically floods and has standing water. That seems to, and that plant, I know that plant has a reputation for wet soils, but wet, moist soils are different than standing water. And so red twig dogwood is something that, you know, if you had a swale or something like that, you could put it at the edge of it, but to plant it down in the swale where there's standing water for long periods of time, I think that's going to be problematic for the red twig dogwood. So other things, you can use the Itea. You can use, let's see, what else? Oh, any of the dwarf willows will take that very nicely. And winterberry, the deciduous holly, is another native. And I have an area in my garden called the Delta, and the water literally flows across that and sometimes stands for hours at a time. And the winterberry have come through beautifully in that situation. And I would actually trust them more than a red twig dogwood. So again, the red twig dogwood, I would say, just keep that to the edge of that rather than planting it down right in the bottom of the, where the water is standing. Do we have any more?
Did you answer all these ones? I've
done all of those. Okay. Does Fothergilla, do you want to slide in here with me? Does Fothergilla need sulfur applied? Not really. It is not a plant that we see as an acid lover. And so that's not really, I don't think that's a consideration, even in our alkaline soils. Okay, Shane, can you please repeat when you would give a rose of Sharon a good shaping to keep it compact and full? Because it's blooming in the summer, it's blooming on the growth that it makes in May, June, and early July. So you could go ahead, typically I would do it in late winter or early spring, and you can do however much shaping you want, taking off the old seed heads and taking it back. You might want, you can even wait until later in May, almost to Memorial Day, when you start seeing little buds coming out, and that way you can prune immediately above a leaf bud. So we scroll up here.
Shane, did you get Shane?
I got Shane.
And you got, yep, I think we got everyone. Any other questions?
Are there any other questions? Oh, you're going very easy on me today. You took pity on my lack of technological skills. All right, well, someone has raised their hand.
Repeat Rose of Sharon, did you do that one?
I've already done that one, yeah.
Looks like we got them all then.
All right, thank you so much. And we look forward to having you on board with us next week when we do All-Star Hydrangeas, 25 All-Star Hydrangeas at 10 o'clock next Friday. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.